Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the book of Exodus. Today we're going to be looking at Exodus chapters 9 through 12, and again, we're going to be looking at at Moses trying to get his people let go, and Pharaoh is holding on, not wanting to let them go. We've already seen 4 plagues, and we are going to begin in chapter 9 with plague number 5, which is a plague on the livestock. And all Egyptian livestock suddenly become sick and begin to die, but not one Israelite animal is affected. Now, after Moses, after that plague, there comes another one in verses 8 to 12, which is the boils. And so what happens is Moses tosses soot from a furnace into the air, and then festering boils break out on all of the people and the animals in Egypt. And so it says in verse 12, "But the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not heed them, just as the Lord had spoken to Moses." So what's important to note there is that to this point in the story, Pharaoh had hardened his own heart, but now God has hardened it instead. Willful disobedience can reach a point of no return, and that's what's happened here for Pharaoh. God does give us an opportunity to turn from our wicked ways. He gives us an opportunity to change, but at some point, that willful disobedience turns into really just more of who you are instead of a choice you make. So then, after the boils, the 7th plague was hail and lightning. So before this plague, God tells Moses and Pharaoh the purpose of the plagues, that you may see my power, and that my fame might spread throughout the earth. So some Egyptians heed God's warning and bring their livestock in from the fields for protection from the fearful lightning and hail. Pharaoh tells Moses that he will let his people go, but changes his mind as soon as the plague stops. And I said in there, and he says in verse 16 that when he explains the purpose, when he explains why he's doing it, God is sovereign, and he rules with such a mighty hand that he raises up even adversaries in order to demonstrate to the world that his glory and might. So that's what's happening here in Egypt. God could have just made Pharaoh decide, okay, I'll just let them go. And God could have done that. He could have made that Pharaoh's opinion, okay? But he let Pharaoh make his own decisions, and he did that so that he could show his own powers and he could show his wonders, and so the world would know that he is God. There is a God in Israel, and how powerful he was. And then after that, we had the plague of locusts, which is the 8th plague. Pharaoh agrees to allow only the men of Israel to go worship the Lord. Moses rejects this offer, and the Lord sends a strong east wind that blows in the worst locust plague in Egyptian history. Pharaoh repents, the Lord removes the locust, and then Pharaoh changes his mind once again, which brings us the next plague, the 9th plague, which is the plague of darkness. The Lord sends a deep, terrifying darkness over all of Egypt for 3 whole days. Pharaoh then agrees to let the people go, but the flocks have to stay, and Moses refuses. And then that brings us to the worst plague yet, which is, we'll see in Exodus 11, of the death of firstborn sons. So the Lord tells Moses that this plague is the one that's going to result in Israel's freedom. And in verse 3, it says, "Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants and in the sight of the people." So when we do what the Lord requires of us, God takes pleasure in causing even our enemies to show us favor. And so you might wonder, all these things that God's doing through Moses, why is Pharaoh letting him live? Why are the Egyptians letting him live? Why isn't he like a marked man with wanted posters, wanted dead or alive? Well, because God has used him, and his fame is growing, and people respect him, and they realize that he is a servant of the Most High God. So they're not going to mess with him. So the new plague is coming, which is going to be the death of the firstborn sons. And so God does have them he lays out some ground rules kind of so that his people will be protected. And what they need to do is they need to prepare. So each Israelite family is instructed to slay a lamb on the 14th of the month of the Hebrew calendar, which is in the spring. Its blood must be sprinkled on the door frame of the house. And the Lord warns the people that he will kill all the firstborn sons and firstborn male animals in the land of Egypt. But he reassures them that when I see the blood, I will pass over you, sparing the firstborn of the home from death. And so this is what they celebrate when the Jews celebrate Passover. And this is what the Passover was. God came, he promised, his plague was to wipe out all the firstborns in the land of Egypt. And that was going to include the Israelites too if they didn't do this. He gave them simple instructions. The instructions were to slay a lamb and paint his blood on the frame, and God would know that these are my people, and I will leave them alone. And so after that, following the death of his firstborn on the 14th of the month, Pharaoh summons Moses and commands him to lead Israel out of Egypt. It's no longer Moses negotiating with, can we go, can we go? Pharaoh's like, you need to go now. I don't want to see you ever again. You, your people, your flocks, everything, go, get. And so the frightened Egyptians after that, they give the departing Israelites clothing and costly gifts, silver and gold. The Egyptians are bribing them to get away. Go away. We don't want any more of these plagues. And so then some 600,000 men, some of whom were not Israelites, along with their wives and children, leave Egypt that night. And so Israel, it tells us in verses 40 to 41 that Israel has been in Egypt for the past 430 years. So we see how long this captivity lasted. And so then they have the Passover festival. And we see that 42 to 45. So foreigners are forbidden to eat the Passover lamb unless they are circumcised, and no bone of the Passover lamb is to be broken. And so that's what we see here. We have the Passover feast, the first one kind of emphasized here. The Passover lamb symbolized the work that Jesus Christ actually is going to finish in his death on the cross and resurrection from the grave. So the Apostle Paul wrote, Christ, our Passover, was sacrificed for us. And so we've got a lot going on here in these chapters in Exodus, because all of this, like in the kind of the end of Genesis into the first 8 chapters of Exodus, we're building to this. We saw God's people, they were enslaved, they were crying out to God for help, and God answers, and he sends Moses, and Moses doesn't want to go, but then Moses goes, and he talks to Pharaoh. Pharaoh hardens his heart, and there are 10 plagues, and the last one resulted in the death of all the firstborns of Egypt. And then Pharaoh sends God's people out. And so God answers their prayer in a way that they wouldn't have expected, because they wanted to be free, and they probably figured that, I don't know, maybe God would send his armies down. He's the God of angel armies. Maybe he'd send them down to fight, win a military victory. But that's not what he did. He worked through Moses. He worked through these plagues, and he showed his power over Egypt. He showed his power over the gods of Egypt. And his people are going to be let go, and the people are going to know all around the world the power of the God that is in Israel. And that's the same God that we serve, and we see these incredible things that he's done, these signs and these wonders, and that's the God that we serve, and he still has those powers today, and that's what he has done for his people. And so that's where we're going to leave this off today. He has gotten his people out of Egypt, but spoilers, Pharaoh is going to have some second thoughts in our reading next week. So that's all for now. I will see you guys tomorrow in the book of 1 Samuel.